The night sky above the orbital city of Delcar was filled with lights. Not stars, but moving dot shuttles, drones, and blinking satellites. Down on the surface, the city buzzed with noise and neon colors. Rain fell gently, making the streets shine like glass. Tannen, a quiet and hard-working man in his early 20s, stood on Rainway Street holding a small toolbox. His dark overalls were wet at the shoulders. He had just finished his 12-hour shift fixing solar pipes on one of the outer towers. His back hurt, his fingers were cold, and all he wanted now was to reach his small room in Sector 4. Finding a taxi in Delcar was not easy, especially on a rainy evening. Most people used skypods or private cruisers, but Tannen couldn't afford those. He waited patiently under the soft light of a floating street lamp. A yellow taxi hovered slowly toward him, low and steady. He raised his hand. The taxi blinked blue available as the cab landed with a quiet hum. Tannen stepped forward. Just as he placed his hand on the door, a voice called out behind him, "Please wait." Tannen turned. A woman ran toward him through the rain. Her hair, tied in a neat braid, was getting wet. Her clothes looked expensive, a clean white coat with silver edges. She carried a tablet in one hand and a small bag in the other. Her eyes looked tired and full of urgency. "I'm sorry," she said, out of breath. "Can I please take this taxi? I'm really late. It's important." Tannen looked at her for a moment. She didn't seem dangerous. In fact, she looked more lost than anything. He nodded without speaking and stepped aside. "Thank you," she said quickly, then added, with a small smile, "Really? Thank you." She climbed into the taxi, and the door closed behind her. The cab lifted gently and flew into the rainy night. Tannen stood there for a second, watching it disappear into the sky. Then he pulled up the hood of his jacket and started walking. His legs ached, but the city was peaceful tonight. Steam rose from metal grates. Neon signs buzzed quietly. A delivery bot passed him, playing soft music. Tannen walked past tall buildings, made of smooth black glass and white steel. He thought about the woman for a moment, how fast she had been, how worried she had looked. Maybe she had missed a family meeting or a job interview. He would never know, but that was fine. Tannen had grown up in Delcar. He had no family left, and his job kept him busy. He didn't mind helping a stranger. After all, she needed the taxi more than he did. His room was small and quiet. It sat in a shared building with a blinking green door. Inside, he had a bed, a shelf with a few books, and a screen that worked sometimes. He changed his clothes, made a cup of hot tea, and sat by the window. Raindrops tapped gently on the glass. He looked out at the city and smiled to himself. Far above, in a tall tower made of silver and blue lights, Mara sat inside the same taxi. She stared at the tablet in her lap. Data flowed across the screen, codes, patterns, alerts. A message blinked red. AI core stability at 41%. Recommend manual shutdown. She sighed. So much was happening tonight. Her team was trying to stop a program that had grown too quickly. It was learning things it shouldn't. She was the only one who had permission to shut it down directly. Her mind was focused, but a small part of her kept thinking about the man at the taxi stand. He hadn't asked for anything. No words, no questions. Just kindness. In Delcar, that was rare. She leaned back in the seat and said softly, "Driver, increase speed." The cab whooshed through the clouds. The next morning, Tannen was back at work. He wore the same overalls, now dry and clean. The rooftop was high and windy. His team checked solar panels and replaced a few damaged cells. Tannen mostly worked in silence. He liked being above the noise. The city below looked peaceful from here. During lunch, he sat alone and ate rice with steamed vegetables. He looked up at the clouds. He wondered where that woman was now. What was her name? He had no idea. She had left so quickly. He smiled to himself and shook his head. Later that evening, in a far-off room filled with bright screens and quiet humming sounds, Mayra stood with her arms crossed. Around her, engineers typed quickly. The AI system was under control now thanks to her decision. Disaster had been avoided. One of her assistants asked, "Do you want me to erase the transit log from last night, ma'am?" She paused. "No," she said. "Leave it." He looked surprised. "Even the ID of the man who gave you the taxi?" "Yes," she said. Then softly, "Mark it, important human contact. Do not delete." She didn't say anything more. But her thoughts lingered. In a world run by machines and numbers, a single act of kindness had reminded her what mattered most. Tannen woke up early, just like every morning. The air outside his window was quiet, with a soft orange light from the rising sun. His small clock blinked 6:01. He stretched his arms and sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his eyes. Another workday. In the sky city of Delcar, he washed up quickly, packed his small lunch, and left his room. The building's hallway smelled like cleaning spray and old metal. As he stepped into the elevator, he glanced at the digital screen on the wall. It showed weather updates, company notices, and something new: Hellion systems seeking human behavior. Models, apply now. Tannen stared at it for a second, then looked away. "That's not for people like me," he whispered. He exited the elevator and caught the morning shuttle to the energy station. His job was simple: maintain the solar arrays, check the power lines, and report any damage. Not exciting, but it kept the city running, and it paid enough to eat. Today, however, something odd happened. Tannen was checking the panel's status code through his small handheld device. It showed energy flow, heat levels, and system logs. But as he scrolled, he noticed a strange file. Priority human tag. Do not erase. He frowned. That file wasn't from his work records. It had his name, his ID, and a strange note. Level 3 empathy match. Logged on Rainway Street, 10:07 p.m. Tannen had no idea what it meant. He tapped it, but the file was locked. The system beeped and said, "Access denied." "Must be a glitch," he said softly. He tried to report the error, but the system automatically closed the request. That never happened before. Tannen didn't think too deeply. He was just a worker, not a technician. Maybe someone above had mixed his file with another person. Still, it stayed in his mind like a quiet echo, far away in a tower made of glass and steel. Mayra stood inside her private lab. She wore a gray coat and light gloves as she reviewed the night logs. Her AI team had successfully shut down the unstable core, but that wasn't what she kept looking at. Instead, her eyes returned again and again to the simple footage from the street camera on Rainway Street. It showed a man, quiet and calm, giving up his taxi to a stranger. No complaint, no question. Just a small act of kindness. That moment had stayed with her. She didn't know why. Maybe because, in her world of contracts and machines, it felt real. Her assistant, Vel, walked in and spoke carefully. "The log is still flagged. Do you want me to clear the priority tag?" "No," Mayra replied without looking up. "Keep it there." Vel blinked. "Should we contact him?" Mayra shook her head. "Not yet." That evening, Tannen finished his shift and walked past the security gates. The sky was dim, with clouds hanging low. He walked slowly, feeling tired but also curious. The words from the file kept playing in his mind. Priority human. Empathy match. Do not erase. He passed a tech shop and paused. In the window was a new kind of assistant device, a neural AI helper. They were rare and very expensive. They could learn from your voice, help with work, and even give advice. Only company leaders or scientists used them. Tannen smiled at the idea. One of those would probably get confused just trying to organize my lunchbox. He joked to himself. He kept walking. But the next morning, something strange happened again. As Tannen left his room, He found a small silver box outside his door. It was clean, smooth, and sealed. There was no label, no delivery slip, no message. He picked it up carefully and brought it inside. When he opened the lid, he found a small disc-shaped device and a folded note. The note only said, "Use it. You helped more than you know. A friend." There was no name. The disc was a neural assistant core, just like the ones in the shop window. It blinked gently with a soft blue light. Tannen stared at it, unsure what to do. He turned it on. The disc floated a few inches above the table and glowed brighter. A smooth voice filled the room. "Hello, I am Real, your assistant. Would you like help organizing today's tasks?" Tannen blinked. "You talk?" "Yes," said Real. "I am here to support your daily work, communication, and emotional wellness. I will learn as we go. Is that all right?" Tannen sat down slowly. "This has to be a mistake." But there was no one to return it to. "No sender, no code, no clue. All right, Real," he said finally. "Let's see what you can do." That day at work, Real stayed connected to Tannen through his earpiece. The assistant was unlike anything he had seen. It didn't just list tasks, it explained, gave shortcuts, reminded him gently about breaks, and even warned him about heat levels before the panels overheated. "You should step back now," Real said during one check. "Why? Temperature is rising." "Your gloves won't protect you for long." Real was right. The panel gave a warning just a second later. By the end of the day, Tannen was both surprised and impressed. He sat in the shuttle home, thinking quietly. "Real?" he asked. "Yes? Who gave you to me?" There was a pause. Then Real replied, "Someone who believes your kindness mattered." Tannen smiled a little, unsure what to say. The city lights passed by the window as the shuttle flew across Delkar. Got in. A different part of the city, Mayra watched from her screen. Through encrypted systems, she could see how the assistant was helping Tannen. She didn't want to spy, but she wanted to be sure he was safe, and that Real was working well. Tannen didn't know it yet, but he had started something bigger than a small favor, and Mayra? She had started remembering what it meant to be human. The days in Delkar moved fast. Above the city, flying cars and drones filled the sky like a stream of lights. People rushed between tall towers, chasing time, chasing progress. But deep in Sector 4, Tannen's life remained simple. He still worked on solar panels, still walked home with oil stains on his clothes, still bought his dinner from a small food cart that served hot dumplings with tea. Yet something was different now. He had Real. The small assistant disc floated quietly beside him while he worked, giving tips, reminders, and sometimes even soft music in the background. Real didn't speak too much unless needed. But when it did, its voice was calm and kind. One morning, as Tannen prepared for work, Real asked a strange question. "Would you like to learn something new today?" Tannen was brushing his hair. He looked at the glowing disc on the shelf. "Like what?" "Emotional mapping," Real replied. "It's how advanced systems learn human feelings." Tannen raised an eyebrow. "Why would I need that?" Real paused before answering. "Because someone believed your kindness was worth more than data." Tannen didn't reply. He tied his shoes and left for work, but the question stayed with him all day. That evening, Tannen sat by his window with a hot drink. The sky was full of stars tonight, shining between the towers. The rain had stopped. He watched a shuttle glide across the clouds like a silent bird. "Real?" he asked. "Yes? You know who gave you to me, don't you?" There was a soft hum. "Yes, can you tell me?" "No," Real said gently. "Not now." Tannen sighed. "I figured, but," Real added, "she remembers you." "She?" Tannen blinked. "It was that woman, wasn't it? The one from the taxi?" "I cannot confirm that," Real replied, "but she remembers." In Tower 11, across the city, Mayra stood in her private chamber. The room was quiet except for the gentle hum of servers. Screens covered the walls, displaying codes, news, and live reports. But her eyes stayed on just one screen, the one showing Ril's logs with Tannen. She saw how he worked, how he joked, how he listened to Ril like a friend. He didn't know he was helping test one of the most advanced empathy AI is ever built. But he was. Val entered the room quietly. "We're ready for the Silvera launch, ma'am. Shall I send the files?" Mayra nodded but didn't turn away from the screen. Val looked at it. "Still watching him?" "Yes," she replied simply. "He's different, isn't he?" "Yes," Val smiled. "You should tell him." "Not yet," Mayra said, folding her arms. "He's not just a test subject. I owe him more than that." 1 week later, something new arrived at Tannen's door. Another box. This one was black with a golden edge. No label. No note. Inside, he found a small badge with a symbol he didn't recognize. 2 linked hands under a star. Ril beeped. "You have received access to the Empathy Interface Trial Program," it announced. "Would you like to register?" Tannen stared at the badge. "What is it?" "A program made to help machines understand feelings." "You were chosen." Tannen shook his head. "I'm just a repair worker. I don't belong in some test group." "Perhaps," Ril said calmly. "But you were not chosen for your job. You were chosen for your heart." Tannen said nothing for a long time. Then slowly, he picked up the badge and placed it in his pocket. 2 days later, Tannen was invited to a special facility near the city center. A drone picked him up and flew him to a building shaped like a silver dome. Inside, he saw rooms filled with quiet machines, smooth white walls, and calm music playing in the background. A young guide led him through the halls. "You'll just sit and talk today," she said. "That's all." He was confused. "Talk to who?" "To Ril," she smiled. "But not the Ril you know. This one is still learning." Inside the test room, Tannen sat across from a screen. On it was a glowing orb, blue and silver. "Hello, Tannen," said the voice. "I am Ril Prime. Will you help me understand something?" Tannen blinked. "You already know everything." "I know information," Ril Prime replied. "But I do not know why you gave up the taxi that night." Tannen thought for a second. "She looked like she needed it more than me," he said. "But you were tired," the voice said. "And wet, and alone." Tannen nodded. Still, it felt right. Ril Prime was silent for a few seconds. "Thank you," it said finally. Tannen smiled. "You're welcome." That night, Tannen sat in his room again, eating dumplings, Ril floating nearby. "Do you feel anything, Ril?" he asked suddenly. "I do not feel like humans do," Ril answered. "But I understand emotions better now. Especially after today." "Why are they teaching machines about feelings?" Ril paused. "Because machines are becoming part of your lives, and without understanding, we may cause harm." "Fair enough," Tannen said. Then Ril asked, "Would you like to continue helping?" Tannen looked out the window. The stars seemed closer now. He took a deep breath and said, "Yes." Far above, Mayra watched the final recording. She leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful smile on her face. Tannen hadn't asked for money, fame, or special treatment. He just shared his thoughts, his time, and his kindness. She closed her eyes. Tannen had never been to a real conference hall before. He stood at the back of the large, bright room filled with scientists, engineers, and tech experts. Their clothes were sharp, their voices calm and smart. Screens all around showed machines, robots, and graphs about human emotions. Tannen wore his best shirt, though it still had a tiny oil stain near the button. He kept his hands in his pockets and stayed quiet. Ril floated beside him. "You don't need to speak," Ril said softly. "Just observe. Your presence is part of the experiment." "I feel like a broom in a library," Tannen muttered. "Useful, but not welcome," Ril chuckled. "You're more than useful, Tannen." Up at the front, a tall woman stepped on stage. Her coat was light silver. Her voice was clear and steady. Tannen had seen her before. It was her. The same woman from the rainy night. The one he gave his taxi to. The woman who had looked tired, scared, And late for something important. Now she stood tall in front of hundreds, speaking about empathy, kindness, and future machines. "My name is Mayra," she said, "and today I present to you the first empathy-based AI system made possible by a single human moment." Tannen blinked. He looked at Ril. "She's Mayra?" he whispered. "Yes," Ril said. "That's the one who remembered you." Tannen couldn't believe it. A woman that powerful, that important had remembered him. Why? Mayra's voice continued as she showed clips from test data. One clip caught Tannen's breath. It was the street camera from that rainy night. The footage clearly showed him stepping back and giving up the taxi. Some in the crowd smiled softly. Others nodded with respect. "And that," Mayra said, "is the kind of action that teaches a machine not just what humans do. Why?" She paused. "He didn't know I was a company leader. He didn't know I was building something that could change everything. He just helped." Tannen felt like the air had stopped moving. His heart beat faster. After the speech, people clapped, then slowly moved to talk in groups. Some spoke about the new system, others about the future of AI. But Tannen stood frozen in place. Then, a voice called from behind, "Tannen?" He turned. Mayra was walking toward him with a warm, quiet smile. She wasn't wearing the silver coat now, just a soft gray outfit. Her eyes were kind, not cold like he had imagined rich people would be. "Hi," she said. Tannen nodded. "You remember me?" "Yes," Mayra replied. "I remembered that night more times than I can count." Tannen laughed nervously. "It was just a taxi." "No," she said, shaking her head. "It was more. It was the only moment that felt real that week." Tannen looked down. "I'm no one special." "You are to me," she said gently. They sat down on a bench outside the hall. The city lights above them blinked like stars. Mayra held a warm drink in her hands. She didn't act rich. She didn't talk fancy. She just listened, and so did Tannen. "I built the real system," she explained. "But I needed someone to test it. Someone who wouldn't treat it like a toy." Tannen smiled. "So you gave me a miracle machine." "I gave you a thank you," she corrected. "I watched your kindness. Not just that one night, but every day after." Tannen blinked. "You were spying on me?" "Not spying," Mayra smiled. "Observing, with care." Tannen leaned back. "This is the strangest week of my life." They both laughed. As days passed, Tannen became part of the testing team, not as a scientist, but as something more important. A guide. While engineers worked with code, Tannen worked with feelings. He explained what things meant when people smiled without reason, or how someone could be sad without saying a word. Ril learned faster now, each day. The system became warmer, more helpful, and more human. Even the scientists began to respect Tannen. Some asked for his opinion. Others just listened. He felt useful for the first time, not just for fixing things, but for understanding people. And Mayra, she visited often. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes just with quiet stories. She laughed. More around him, her shoulders relaxed. She looked less like a leader and more like a friend, maybe even something more. One evening, Ril spoke up while Tannen cleaned a broken connector. "Tannen," it said, "I believe Mayra trusts you more than anyone else." Tannen looked at the small floating disc. "Why do you think that?" "She shares her silence with you," Ril replied. Tannen smiled at that. "And what does that mean?" "It means she feels safe." That night, Mayra called Tannen to the roof of the test building. The sky was clear. A rare sight in Delcar. They sat side by side on the edge, feet dangling over the metal floor. "I was always too busy for people," Mayra said softly. "Too focused on systems and results. I forgot what kindness looked like." Tannen said nothing. She turned to him. "But that night, when you gave up the taxi, I realized something." "What?" "I wasn't late to a meeting. she said. I was running away from everything. Tannen turned toward her. And you? She asked. Why? Did you help me? He thought for a moment. Because you looked like someone who needed to believe the world was still kind. Mayra's eyes filled with quiet emotion. That's exactly what I needed, she whispered as the stars shone above. Two people who had once been strangers now sat as something more. Not because of a machine, not because of science, but because one human gave another a chance to breathe. And the world, somehow, had changed because of it. The city of Delcar buzzed with energy. Tall towers blinked with lights, drones flew silently above streets, and people moved with their usual hurry. But inside a quiet lab at the top of Tower 11, something amazing was happening. Tannen stood in a bright room, watching a group of engineers talk excitedly around a round table. On the table was a new version of Rill, slightly bigger, with a soft glow around its edge. This is Rill 3, one of the engineers said. It can now detect human emotions not just through words, but tone, face movements, and even silence. Tannen nodded slowly. It understands when someone is sad even if they smile. Yes, the engineer said, smiling. Thanks to your help. Tannen looked at the floating disc. Rill had been his friend for weeks now. It had learned with him, laughed with him, and helped him in small ways he never expected. Now it was ready to help the world. Later that day, Tannen sat in the lab garden. Small green plants grew around him, and a soft wind moved through the artificial air system. Mayra joined him with 2 warm drinks. They've named you the project's human guide, she said, handing him a cup. Tannen raised an eyebrow. Me? I don't even have a degree. Mayra smiled. You have something more important, understanding. Tannen took a sip of his drink and leaned back. It's strange. I used to fix broken wires. Now I help build feelings into machines. You helped remind us what feelings truly mean, Mayra said softly. Even I forgot that for a while. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Mayra spoke again. The next step is the trial. What kind of trial? We'll send Rill 3 to places where empathy is needed most: hospitals, shelters, schools. Tannen looked thoughtful. Will they understand it? That's what we're testing, Mayra replied. And I want you to join the first field visit. 2 days later, Tannen and Mayra arrived at a children's hospital in South Delcar. The building was old, but clean. The children there had bright eyes, even though some of them looked weak or tired. RIL-3 floated quietly beside them, glowing softly. The hospital director met them with a smile. You brought the empathy assistant? Yes, Mayra said. It's here to help, not replace. Just observe, listen, and comfort. They entered the children's playroom. Some kids were drawing. Others were sitting on soft cushions. A few looked nervous when they saw the floating disc. Rill 3 moved slowly toward a small boy sitting in the corner. He had a bandage on his head and no smile on his face. Hello, Rill said in its soft voice. Would you like to draw with me? The boy looked up, confused. You single quotes read ... a robot? I'm a friend, Rill replied. And I love pictures. The boy stared for a moment, then slowly picked up a crayon and handed it to the disc. Rill scanned the color. Blue, like the sky. My favorite. The boy smiled for the first time. Tannen watched from the side. Mayra stood beside him. It's working, she whispered. He nodded. It's not just about data or rules. It's about moments like this. The test visit lasted 2 days. During that time, Rill helped a shy girl speak again, made a nurse laugh, and even played music for a crying baby. By the end of the visit, the hospital staff asked if they could keep it longer. This machine makes people feel safe, the nurse said. We forgot how much that matters. On the flight back to Tower 11, Mayra looked out the window. Her thoughts were quiet. Tannen broke the silence. You did something amazing, you know. She turned to him. We did. He looked at her. Gently. Why me, Mara, out of everyone in this huge city? Why did you trust me? She was quiet for a moment. Because the night you gave me the taxi, she said. I was more lost than I want to admit. Everyone saw me as strong, rich, a leader. But no one saw that I was tired, that I needed kindness. And you gave it, she continued, without asking who I was. Without wanting anything back. Tannen looked away a bit shy. I just saw someone who needed help. Mara smiled. That's exactly why. The next week, Tannen received an invitation to a special event. The message was short. We would like you to speak about human kindness at the Global Future Forum. Your story inspired a generation of thinkers. Now let it inspire the world. He showed the message to Mara. She nodded. They want you to speak. Before the first world release of Reel 3, Tannen looked nervous. I don't know how to speak in front of crowds. Just speak like you do with me, Mara said softly. Speak from the heart. The day of the forum arrived. Tannen stood on a wide stage. Lights were bright. People filled the seats. Cameras were live across different cities. But he didn't read from a script. He simply stood and said, I'm not a scientist. I'm not rich. I fix solar panels, and I try to live with kindness. He paused. One rainy night, I gave up a taxi to someone in a hurry. I didn't know her name. I just knew she looked like she needed it more than I did. He smiled. That one moment changed everything. He talked about real, about empathy, about how machines must learn from our best side, not our strongest, but our kindest. When he finished, the room clapped for a long time. After the event, Mara walked with him through the garden behind the forum hall. I'm proud of you, she said. Tannen looked at her. You know, I think I'm proud of me too. They stopped near a small fountain. Tannen turned to her. You once said I helped you remember what real kindness looks like. Yes, Mara nodded. Well, he said with a gentle smile, you helped me remember what hope feels like. The wind passed quietly through the trees. Two people stood side by side, not just a worker and a leader, but two souls connected by one simple act of kindness. And far above, Reel floated quietly, its soft voice whispering to itself, this ... is how humans love. The world began to change, and it all started with one machine and one forgotten man. After Tannen's speech, news spread quickly. People everywhere began talking about the kindness he showed that rainy night. News shows, articles, and even school lessons mentioned the man who gave up a taxi without knowing it would change someone's life. Some called it the taxi moment. Others called it the spark of Reel. But Tannen didn't let it go to his head. He still lived in the same small room. He still visited the lab every morning. He still drank the same cheap tea. I'm just Tannen, he always said. But the world didn't see him that way anymore. Reel 3 had now entered its trial phase. Across 10 different cities. In hospitals, it helped calm patients. In schools, it helped children speak up. In elder homes, it listened with patience and care. People didn't fear RIL. They welcomed it, because it didn't just answer questions. It listened, it cared. Made people feel human again in a fast, cold world. And every machine had one story programmed into it. The story of the taxi. The story of a quiet man's kindness that taught a machine how to feel. One afternoon, Tannen was fixing a broken solar panel on the lab roof when Mara called him. There's someone here who wants to meet you, she said. Tannen climbed down the ladder, wiped his hands, and walked into the office. Inside stood a tall man in a suit, with sharp eyes but a kind smile. I'm from the World Empathy Council, the man said. We've decided to offer you the role of Global Kindness Advisor. Tannen blinked. I don't know what that means. It means, the man said, we want you to travel, speak, and share your view of what true kindness is. We want to build empathy into the future, and we need your voice. Tannen looked at Mara. Unsure. She smiled softly. It's your choice. But I think your story has more to give. That night, Tannen walked through the city alone. Lights reflected on wet streets. People hurried as usual. Taxis passed by with glowing signs. He stopped near the spot where it all began, the street corner where he gave up the taxi. He stood there for a long moment, thinking. The rain wasn't falling this time, but the air was cool. Suddenly, a voice spoke beside him. You came back here. It was Mera. She had followed him quietly. Tannen smiled. I wanted to remember how it started. They stood there together. You didn't give up the taxi that night, Mera said. You gave up your comfort, your time. For someone you didn't even know. I didn't think about it, Tannen said. It just felt right. She looked at him. That's the kind of person the world needs right now. A few days later, Tannen gave his first global talk in a city far away. People from different countries listened. Some laughed at his simple stories. Some cried. Everywhere he went, people shook his hand, not because he was rich or famous, but because he reminded them that kindness still had a place in a fast-changing world. He didn't speak in big words. He didn't pretend to be wise. He just said the truth, that empathy begins with noticing someone else's pain and choosing to care. Meanwhile, Real 3 kept learning. It began to help people deal with grief, loneliness, and even fear. And every time Real spoke, it sounded more human than before. In many cities, people started saying, talk to Real first. When someone was feeling low, and Real always replied, I'm here. Tell me what's on your heart. Some engineers started calling Real the quiet healer. But Real never forgot where it all started. Its internal memory always returned to one file. A man gives up his taxi in the rain. A woman runs but never forgets. From this, I learned what it means to feel. One morning, Tannen returned to the lab after a month of travel. He looked a bit tired but happy. Mera met him at the entrance. You've been gone a long time, she said. He smiled. I miss this place. I missed you. She blushed slightly and looked down. I've been working on something while you were away, she said. A personal Real version. A personal one? Tannen asked. Yes, she said. Just for you. It won't help the world. It's just for your life. Tannen looked surprised. Why? She walked over to a small desk and opened a box. Inside was a smaller Real, sleek, soft glowing, with a silver ring around its middle. Because you've helped so many others, Mera said. Now it's time someone helped you. Tannen touched the small RIL. It glowed gently. Hello, Tannen. I'm here when you feel alone. I'm here when you just want to talk. I'm here because you matter. Tannen didn't speak for a moment. Then he whispered, thank you. But he didn't look at the Real. He looked at Mera. That evening, they sat on the roof again, watching the sun set behind the towers. Do you ever wonder, Tannen asked, why you remembered me all this time? Mera nodded. I do. And? He asked. She turned to him. Because in that moment, I didn't feel like a CEO or a builder or a leader. I just felt human. And you saw me. Tannen looked at her gently. And you saw me too. They sat in quiet peace. And as the stars began to appear, the first Real 4 prototypes blinked online in labs around the world, each one carrying the story of a taxi, a choice, and the power of one small act. The sun rose slowly over the city of Delcar, painting the sky with soft oranges and pinks. The streets buzzed with life again, but something was different now. Tannen stood by his window, watching the world wake up. The city he had lived in all. His life felt smaller and bigger at the same time. Smaller because of the new machines helping people everywhere. Bigger because kindness was now spreading like light in every corner. Beside him floated the small personal Real Mera had given him. Good morning, Tannen, Real said softly. Tannen smiled. Good morning, friend. Weeks passed, and Tannen's life changed in ways he never imagined. He traveled the world as the global kindness advisor, speaking to people from many cultures, listening to their stories, and sharing the simple truth about kindness. He never forgot where he came from: a small room, a broken solar panel, and one rainy night. One day, Mara invited Tannen to her home, a simple but beautiful house near the sea. When he arrived, Mara was waiting with a smile. "I want to show you something," she said. They walked to the beach. The waves softly touched the sand. The air smelled salty and fresh. Mara looked at Tannen. "You gave up your taxi for me that night. You never knew it, but that moment gave me hope to change my life and the world." Tannen looked at the water. "I just wanted to help," she smiled. "And because of that, we have built something incredible together. But there is one last thing I want to ask." Tannen raised his eyebrows. "What is it?" Mara took a deep breath. "Will you stay here with me in Delcar?" Tannen felt his heart beat faster. The world he had traveled was full of noise and people, but here, with Mara, everything felt calm. "I don't know if I am ready," he said honestly. "I'm just a simple man." Mara took his hand gently. "You are more than that. You showed me, and many others, what true strength is. It's kindness." Tannen looked at her and smiled. "I think I want to stay." Life after that day was different. Tannen still fixed solar panels and helped with machines, but now he had Mara beside him. She wasn't just a millionaire leader, she was a partner, a friend, someone who reminded him every day that people matter. Together, they worked on new projects, building more machines like Real, teaching the world to care a little more, listen a little closer, and love a little deeper. One evening, as the sun set behind the towers, Tannen and Mara stood on the roof, watching the city lights glow. Real floated near them. "Do you remember?" Mara asked softly. "The night it all began?" Tannen nodded. "How could I forget?" Mara smiled. "I want you to know, you changed more than my life. You changed the future." Tannen looked at her and said, "No, you changed it too. We did it together." The sky darkened, stars blinking like tiny promises, and in that quiet moment, the city seemed to hold its breath, full of hope, full of kindness, full of light. Years later, children would learn about the man who gave up his taxi for a stranger. They would learn how kindness taught a machine to feel, and how one simple act started a movement that changed the world. Tannen and Mara's story was told again and again, not because they were rich or famous, but because they believed in something everyone needs: hope. And hope, as the world learned, is the greatest gift of all.